and welcome to 𝗪𝗿𝐻𝑜USEplants.com, where we teach you all about gardening in the great indoors. If you'd like to support our show, please use our Amazon affiliate link below. Today I have a viewer-inspired video, and it is going to be on rooting pothos, not in water, but in a rooting medium. And this was requested by Abigail J., who said that it's been slow and terrible trying to root her pothos in water, and she wanted to know if this rooting medium on my video about this, how to make this rooting medium, would work for pothos, and it does work really well. Now, pothos, you may be thinking, well, I've rooted plenty of pothos in water, what's the big deal? Why not just do it that way? And as a matter of fact, as I mentioned, you can do it that way. However, there's a few different things. It can take, depending on the water, what's in your water, it can take a little while for them to root. It does take a while for them to root in the water. It's still going to take them a while to root in the rooting medium. However, you do cut out a bunch of time in between, because what happens when you get those roots from the pothos in water is then when you go to plant it in soil, the best way to make sure that the plant survives and then transitions well into soil is to add soil to the container of water slowly so that the plant starts to create soil roots, as opposed to as opposed to water roots. As I explain in my, I have a I believe it's 2 parts, maybe, I think it's even more than that, part series on getting plants that have been rooted in water to then create soil roots. And in that video, I'm using a Hoya as an example, so I'm linking that for you, as well as anything else I mention here. Now, what you have to do, as mentioned, is transition those water roots to soil roots. And actually, the water roots aren't even going to change into anything. What they're going to do is they will give the plant moisture while the plant then creates soil roots, because soil roots and water roots are completely different. And that's why if you've rooted a plant in water and then stuck it in soil, and even though it has a whole bunch of roots and you think it's all healthy, and it is healthy at that point, but it doesn't make it, it's because the plant didn't then convert to soil roots. So the only reason for those water roots at that time when it's in the soil is just to keep the plant hydrated while it then creates soil roots. So by doing this method, by rooting in this mixture here, we are going to create soil roots, and that is going to cut out that whole in between thing of having to switch to get the plant to acclimate from water roots to soil roots. Okay, so we're going to do that with this plant. Show you the procedure here. Now, you want to look for newer foliage on the part that you are cutting to then root. Okay, the newer the foliage, the more auxins are going to be in these root nodes here, which are also stem nodes. Stem nodes and root nodes have auxin in them, and that creates roots. So the newer the foliage, the better for that. The younger the plant, the more readily it's going to. And also, the healthier that part is. You want to look for a healthy part. So don't think that you can cut out your really straggly parts and have a good experience getting them to root for you, because that's usually not the case. They're weakened, they're older, they don't have a lot of the auxins, root hormone, aka root hormone, in their root nodes, and they're not going to do as well. It's not to say you can't do it, but if you're going to do this whole procedure, you might as well start out with the healthiest plant pieces you can to hopefully have the best luck. Okay, so I have identified this as a really good one. So what I can do, I can lay this along the soil with these 2 nodes and have roots come from both. So that would be very handy to do, and also even from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut right, so you can see here. I'm going to come in a little bit, or not out, but in. So you can see better here, the cutting. Okay, so as mentioned, we've got it here. We got the top part, new leaves on that. As you can see, this is been newly growing. I'm gonna cut. I could even do 3, but I'm gonna do 2 for this one. I'm gonna cut right below, and that bump there is the root node. Also a stem node. So a stem could come from there, but a root is going to when we put it into the rooting medium. Not all plants have such a protrusion. Some just have a bump along there, so that's what you want to look at. But for the pothos, so you want to do it just a little bit underneath that, about an 1/18 of an inch under. I don't want to cut into that node because it could disrupt it and it won't be successful. So cutting that off, you can see what I've got here. Okay, now this leaf I can leave on. There's only 2 leaves on here. What you don't want to do is have a cutting with a ton of leaves on it. It might seem like a good idea, but the problem is the plant is then going to be putting all of its energy, its energy is then divided, basically. It's going to be putting a lot of energy into the leaves because the leaves are on there, it needs to grow them, but it's also going to be trying to root at the same time. So you don't want too many, but you do want some. I wouldn't want to cut these leaves off because these leaves are going to photosynthesize for the plant, which gives the plant energy, which then allows the plant to root well. Okay, so now I'm going to take another cutting or 2. I've got a fairly good sized pot here, so I can fit probably about 3 cuttings, even more in there, but I'm going to do 3 just because it'll give each of them a little bit of room. Okay, so I'm going to be laying on its side because of the way those are positioned, but now I'm going to find one that I can stick, a couple I can stick straight in. Another thing, you saw that I left this part here. You don't want to do that when you're done pruning. You want to prune right above this other node because that's going to create more leaves to come out at that point. This here would just dry up and die, and it takes longer for the plant to then become bushier and start growing. So make sure to remove that when you're doing the pruning to make cuttings. Okay, so I'm going to look for another area. Another thing too to consider with pothos and plants that are variegated, that is that if you prune in the area, prune a variegated piece of foliage, you're more likely to get then a plant that has that variegation on it. Because a lot of pothos, you can see a lot of this is green. However, there is some marbleizing on some of the growth. So like this one here. So what I'm going to do with this one is, now this one would be another one I could lay along the side here. It's got 1, 2, 3 nodes. I think I'm going to do that again too. However, you can also see here where there's a new leaf coming in. I'm going to take that leaf off because we don't want the energy going into a new leaf. We're trying to get roots on the underside of that. And you see I have that marbleized piece. I'm going to leave that there just so I know I've got a marbleized piece going on here in terms of the foliage. I think I'm going to take off this leaf. It's an older leaf and we don't need it, so we're just going to keep 2 on this one as well. Then I'm going to prune it. Actually, there's a bunch of nodes on this one. I'll show you up close here. So this one has a ton of nodes along there. You can see here, bunch over here too. Even over here as much. It's going to be a little unwieldy. The problem with the ones when you set them in like this, they do become a little unwieldy. It's a little hard to keep them into the soil. So I don't want to have too many of those because they'll be popping up. And what happens is if it happens to move, and plants will move on their own sometimes, and it could pop up after it's been creating roots, and I would maybe not see it for a few hours, and then the roots could die, could dry up and die. So I'm going to go right here above this one. You can see that there. And I want to make sure I don't go get even a little bit closer for you, I think. So you can see, I just got to be really careful that I don't cut into that node that's right up top of it. But I think I got it. Yeah, it looks good. So you can see the nodes. I've got 3 at least 3 chances here of getting roots. Ideally, it's great if you get it along all the way along there. Okay, now looking again for one that is just a one up in the air. The one, if you just stick it straight in, it's a lot. It is a lot easier to do that. But like I said, that the ones on the side like this are great because they give you a really good opportunity to get more roots. Okay, and this is really the way pothos does grow too. Okay, so here we have another nice one, new leaf. You can, even one leaf will work. Now this one has a new leaf coming on. I'm gonna leave that on there, but what I'm gonna do is I am going to cut this one right here above this new node there. Then remembering, as I told you to do, to cut off here so that we're left with the new leaf and the node to make more foliage there. Okay, this one I'm going to be able to stick straight in with the one node at the bottom. So that's 3, that's a good amount for this size pot. I could go maybe with one more too, but for now, and it doesn't hurt. I think I do one more actually. It doesn't hurt to have more than one, several actually. It's always a good idea because now see this one doesn't. And then you can also do some pruning when you're doing this. So this one doesn't even have anything, so I'm going to cut it way down there to stimulate some more foliage growth. Okay, still looking for the perfect one. Let's see, here's a nice one. Yeah, I'm gonna take it off right. See, it's got both these leaves. I'm gonna take it off. There's a node that hasn't quite formed there, but it's coming off right here. Okay, so this, it's harder to see. But there's a little ridge here. You'll see the little ridge change in color there. There we go, right along there you can see it. That is where there's a node, so I'm going to cut right here, leaving that ridge, because that's where the node is. It's where the little bit darker green is. So this one's going to go straight in. So one leaf, as long as you have at least one leaf, you're okay. Like I mentioned, there are some plants where you take you do root from the stem itself, but that's not generally the case with pothos. Okay, so we've got some nice cuttings here. Showed you how to do that part. Now I'm going to move the pothos out of the way some here so that I can get into, and I forgot, I need to grab some of these toothpicks that I may need, because those are good for securing the pothos stems, as I was talking to you about, where they tend to want to pop up. Little stones and pebbles work too, and I'll show you that when we get to that part. Okay, now, so here we are, rooting medium. I have a video on how to make this, really easy to make, very effective. It is moistened. You can see how it's moistened. It's sticking to my finger, but you don't want it sloppy wet, but you do need it moist. Roots do need some moisture in order to start growing. Okay, now we're going to take, I like to take a wooden skewer, and I like to use that to make the holes. So I'm going to make 4, well actually I'm going to do the one single one first, and then I'll do the other ones because those are harder to keep down, so it's easier to get that one done first. Okay, now rooting hormone in here, and it is right here. And as mentioned, the roots have auxins in them, and that is what the main ingredient basically in this in the rooting hormone. I have a video on rooting hormone. It's really great to use. It really helps stimulate root growth in plants so that you can more quickly get them to root and then get them into soil and have beautiful new plants. You don't want to stick the cutting or even you like to use a paintbrush too into this because it will contaminate it. So you want to put a little bit into something, another container, and then you want to use from there. And then when you need more, pour a little bit more in. Okay, so here we are. We are going to start with this one with just the one node on the end. And I'm going to brush it on here. You can also stick it in. So if you don't have a brush available, it's also often done this way. Stick it in so it gets some on there. Tap it just to get a little extra off. It's a little moist on the end because it was just cut. One thing, it's fine with fleshy plants, with fleshy leaf plants, with most plants like pothos and philodendron, etc., that you would not let this callus over. You let the callusing over happens with when you propagate succulents, and that's a whole different thing. And I do have a video on propagating them, and there is a little bit different procedure. But for this, it's okay that it's a little moist there, and then it took that rooting hormone in. And the rooting hormone is hitting where the hormones are already, so you see where it doubles up, triples up, quadruples up exponentially your odds of getting them to root. Okay, so I'm going to put them in. I'm not going to put it in too deep, so I made a hole. It's just like that. I don't want it too deep, for one, because I don't want a lot of stem that doesn't have any nodes on it in there, because it's more likely to rot. So we just want basically almost where a little bit over that, because you want to hold it up, and you don't, if there are some roots that start to form, you obviously you don't want them to be exposed to air, but just right underneath there where that node is covered with that rooting hormone, and then press down. Okay, now we've got these ones that were, so I can make little troughs in here. Do two, yeah, and this is plenty with the 3, I think. And I did 4 though. Or did I? Losing track. Oh, this was another one that I did. Okay, and I think this one was the one I meant to put on its side, but I'm not going to, so it's fine to stand up. So this one is another one. I'm going to put it right here. You don't want them too close to the edge. Actually, I want to turn this guy because we are going to be putting a little humidity tent around it. Okay, so this one, same thing. I'm going to put the hormone on the end. Like I said, you can also dip it. Sometimes it's easier with just the one like this, but the ones where they're laying on their side is a little more complicated. Okay, there. Putting it in, making sure the hole's not too deep. Stick it in. Okay, let's see if you want to see, might want to see it a little bit closer up here. The process here. Okay, so now I've got 2 troughs I'm going to make in the back here for these other guys. A little bit. Okay. So you can situate first and figure out, like, okay, is it going to work there well, so that you aren't knocking all the hormone off as you're trying to configure, right? So that, I think these 2 like this will work really well. So now that I know where they're going, I'll just leave that one in there, brush this one, so brushing all the nodes. And then mentioned before, this one has a lot on it. I'm going to take advantage of all of those. Tap it gently. You don't want to knock it all off, but you want to knock off any excess. Put it in like this. And firm it into the soil as much as possible. This one leaf's kind of getting in the way. I actually kept keeping this one leaf here on because it is the variegated one, so I'm going to know when it starts to grow. I can kind of compare. Also, this one too has some variegation, so just having that as a reference point. You can cover it a little bit. You don't want to totally cover it, but you can. You don't want to like bury it really deep, but you can cover it to hold. You want to hold. The point is they're going to, like as mentioned, those root nodes are going to start creating roots, and then you want them to go down and the plant not to be uprooted, right? Okay, one thing you can do is toothpicks kind of against them. It holds them up a little bit to secure them. You can also put tiny little stones, pebbles on top to make sure it stays secure. You can angle it kind of over the top like that. See how that's going to hold it from coming up. So my last one here, lots of nodes on this guy. Be careful not to inhale the rooting hormone, and use gloves. You don't want it on your hands as well. Okay, on there, good. Slight tap. Now I'm going to figure out, I think I want this, if I want the leaves going this way, yes. So making sure to get those two nodes in there, cover with a little bit of the rooting medium. It's okay if the leaves are close to each other. It's actually better because the leaves will transpire. I talk about that in some of my videos. And transpiration is basically they're like our respiration and our sweating, kind of a combination. When they transpire, they emit vapor, water vapor into the air. So they're going to vaporize each other because we don't want this to dry out. We do want this to stay moist, not soppy wet. But the whole system here, the whole ecosystem, little mini ecosystem that we're creating to propagate, to stay moist so that the plants will root more readily, and then the roots will be healthier and not have a chance of drying out as well. Okay, so these two, I'm going to take another toothpick, just angle it over that one a little. And I find the toothpicks work well for the most part. There are some toothpicks, those plastic ones, that have like a little fork, and actually I think maybe some of those are like hors d'oeuvre little forky things. Those work good too. You can, because they have a fork that you can put on either side of the stem. So that's another option. Okay, so now I'm not going to turn this too much because I don't want anything to knock out, but you can see how everything's in there really well. So the next step is going to go out a little bit for this step, so make sure you can see well. So this one, what you want to do next is you want to create a tent over it, as mentioned, to keep the moisture in. So you're creating a little humidity dome. If you have, they make systems where there are domes to put on over it, that's great. Or even if you had something like that was, you can also cut off the bottom of a jug, of a milk jug, and put it over the top, and there's even a little hole in the milk jug, or water jug too, and then you can even take off the cap on the top to make sure it respirates some. The plastic bag is easy as well, so I'm going to show you this system first. So putting these wooden skewers in. You want them to be fairly long, tall, because you do not want the plastic on top of the foliage. You don't want anything touching it, ideally. So like this little leaf, we'll see what happens with that. That's what I was saying, to keep it in as much. So 4 generally is enough here. You can get these skewers when you go out to eat too, and get when they have at certain restaurants where they have them. Okay, now I'm putting this on, and gently. That is the tricky part. This leaf here, I'm gonna have to, I could have put some of the skewers next to the leaves, which would have been good too. So obviously the goal here is not to disrupt what I did and keep it all secure as possible. This usually breathes somewhat. It's not like it gets too, if you get too much condensation here, a lot of condensation in here. Oh, and I forgot, I meant to say you can spray it with a little spray before you do what I just did. So I always forget this part. Okay, hard to spray upside down, but you don't want it too wet. But you do want a little bit in there just for the moisture. Now, if it starts to get really condensed, like I said, you can make little holes. Just hold it up and just cut with scissors. That's better than trying to stab through the thing, because what'll happen then is you could knock everything loose. So just with scissors, just take a little nick here and there, and that will create some air circulation in there, because you want it to remain nice and moist. As I said, you want to see some condensation, be a little hazy in there, but you do not want things dripping like crazy, because then you're going to be open to rotting at that point. Okay, so now it looks like everything's still secure as I had put it. I'm going to take a rubber band and I am going to secure the bottom. This is a nice big one, which I think will be easier to work with. And I'm going to secure the bottom of the plastic on with the rubber band, carefully, 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 not wrecking everything I did. Hopefully, cross your fingers. A rubber band like this that's fairly good sized, where you can tuck it in, is preferable that to a real tight one. It's not like you, like I said, it's not like you need this to be extra tight. It's more just creating a little ecosystem, mini ecosystem, where you're going to get some condensation and moisture will be, most important thing is moisture is retained. You don't want to lose that moisture. Now, in terms, so you can see it's even got, where I sprayed a little bit, it's got some there. So in terms of watering this, basically it is oftentimes easier to make some holes, and then if you can use the long, the watering cans which have the spigot hole thing, and put it through the hole and then get it right around each of the plants, that works. Another thing that you can do is you can just take this off. Water at that point too, it's helpful too, because you'll be able to see, hey, does this look like it's rooting? You can gently tug on the plants, and if they seem to be secure, that likely means they have some rooting going on in there. But don't pull too hard, because it may just be only a little roots, and what the pulling too hard will do is pull the roots right off of the plant, and obviously that's not your goal here. Okay, so you can see here that looks pretty good. We've got more condensation on that one side than the other. So I'm actually want to put a little bit more condensation in there. So as I said, do this before, but it doesn't you don't need a lot, and you have to do it like right before, because the vapor will just dissolve quickly. Okay, so I got that in there. So this will work well for your pothos. As you can see, it looks like a nice little mini greenhouse here, because it is. Now, you don't want this in bright sunlight. You want it in medium light. So you don't want it in front of a window. You don't want it baking away. It's different for succulents. That's a whole different thing. But with most other plants, you want it in a medium light. So maybe on a table in a room that has some light, but not crazy amounts of light. If you're going to put it near a window, you're going to want to close the blinds, shades at that window. Once you start to see growth, that's when the plant is going to need more light. But as it's rooting, it doesn't need the light. It needs light so the leaves can photosynthesize, so it can put energy into the rooting, but it doesn't need a ton of light, because that could be detrimental, especially if the leaves started to burn. Then you're stressing the plant, and you're not going to have good rooting growth going on there. So there you go with how to propagate pothos in rooting medium, and using rooting hormone as well to kickstart it. You can do it without the rooting hormone. It will also work. The humidity will help with that, but the rooting hormone will make it go a lot faster. Thank you for stopping by today. Please leave any comments about any indoor gardening tutorials you'd like to see. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. And please check the bell if you'd like to be notified when new videos are released.